Hey, what's going on, guys? Fire Emblem Heroes just got a pretty big update. There's a lot of topics to cover, so I'll do my best to cover everything and get them out as soon as possible. But for today, I'll be doing an overview of the new legendary weapon upgrades. So we'll start things off with the Falchion Lords. The first one I'll talk about is Marth. Most people would say he got the short end of the stick, but the effect has a nice flavor to it since it does make sense if you understand his character. But anyways, keep in mind that the green text is not the only new effect for these weapons. Pay attention to the white text as well. All of these falchions now restore 10 HP at the start of every second turn instead of every third turn. It's basically renewal 3 instead of renewal 2 if you want to look at it through that perspective. That being said, falchion medic builds for all of these lures just became much better with the new falchion and the renewal 3 skill equipped. They restore 20 HP every second turn instead of a split 10 on the second then the third turn. Now let's talk about the unique effect. Grants attack, speed, defense, resistance +2 to allies within 2 spaces during combat. Basically, drive attack 1, drive speed 1, drive defense 1, and drive resistance 1 built into his weapon. Is it underwhelming? A little bit, but it's far from being bad. Drive buffs are invisible buffs, therefore it cannot get panic deployed, which is kind of convenient considering that Walter's Grand Hero battle was just here not too long ago, and a bunch of players probably sacrificed Walter for panic deploy. But yeah, I mean, his falchion effect isn't anything too special. It doesn't create any new builds, but only a little bit of tweaks in the seed slot and steel slot, which were both flexible slots for most of his builds anyways. If your Marth was running the Fury Desperation set, then try to give him some sort of drive skill in the seed slot and drive defense 2 Sacred Seal. Drive speed with drive defense is a great defensive buff combo for average to above average speed allies to prevent doubles and reduce damage. Drive attack and drive defense is for those slow tanky quicker post allies that purposely get doubled like a Lucas. Drive resistance with drive defense seal is great for distant counter guys like legendary Ike or some lightning breath dragons that are used often to counter both physical and magical ranged enemies. In the assist slot, you may even want to consider using a dual rally skill, either rally speed defense or rally defense resistance, but it depends on what buff skills are equipped on the rest of the units on the team. If your Marth was running a falchion medic set, then the same thing applies here too. Drive skills in the C slot and seal slot. The only difference is that the assist slot is not flexible since Marth has to run reciprocal aid. Next is Lucina, Mass Marth, and Crown's Falchion. All the awakening characters share the same falchion effect. Grants attack, speed, defense, and resistance +4 during combat if unit is adjacent to an ally. That's a lot of extra stats and the requirement is pretty easy to meet. All 3 of these units benefit from every single stat. Despite Crown's base speed being only at 25, a plus speed version has 29 speed and 33 with the new falchion. You can definitely commit resources into his speed to the point where he can prevent doubles from many types of enemies. Both Lucina and Crown suffer in the resistance department, so the extra resistance is nice to reduce damage from all of these dragons running around in arena and the new Grand Hero battles. As for builds, I think you can come up with some pretty creative builds for Crown. As for Lucina, not so much. I think this new falchion works fine with the standard Desperation or falchion medic sets. You can of course play around with the different bond skills that are available in the 8 slot, maybe even consider using Wings of Mercy. There's no right or optimal build, it'll just vary from player to player. Alm's probably got the best weapon upgrade, it's my favorite one, that's for sure. The effect only works on the player phase. If he's at full health and initiates combat, he attacks twice immediately before the enemy's first counter hit. Then after combat, he takes 5 damage. It's basically a 16 might brave weapon that only works at 100% HP and takes some recoil damage after combat, similar to Silica's Ragnarok. However, unlike Ragnarok, Falchion has innate renewal 3, which is perfect. That means Alm doesn't have to rely on having a renewal in the B slot. His upgraded Falchion is just so amazing. It allows him to deal high upfront burst damage and at the same time still be that reliable falchion medic on the side. The other great news is that these falchions also grants a passive 3 HP stat boost. Alm's base HP is 45 and increases to 48, and that makes him an even better infantry pulse or somewhat panic deploy user. For builds, this is what I came up with so far. Reciprocal Aid, Moonbow, Deathblow, Renewal, Infantry Pulse, and Heavy Blade Sacred Seal. This set is great for one round KOing most, if not all the dragons, including Steady Breath Nawi's. I looked into Glimmer, but the problem with Glimmer was that it had problems with plus defense Steady Breath Nawi's, whereas Moonbow does not. You can always opt to go for Draconic Aura with attack +3 Sacred Seal. The problem is that Alm needs the special proc in order to take out Nawi, so in those situations, you'll have to make sure Alm finds some way to charge his special up beforehand, which isn't a difficult task to accomplish. In the B slot, there's not that many options there, so I just went with Renewal because it works perfectly with Falchion and Reciprocal Aid. C slot, I think Infantry Pulse is the best skill there. Panic Ploy is alright, but in high tier arena you are often matched up with armor or Dragon Emblem teams, and the units used on those teams generally have super duper high health, so Panic Ploy isn't that useful in those situations unless your Alm is plus speed or he is summoner supported or something. Alternatively, you can try Life and Death with Wind Sweep and the Phantom Speed Sacred Seal if your Alm is plus speed. Just in case you were going to ask, Wind Sweep does not prevent Falchian's immediate second attack. Next is Sheeta. Her weapon is Winged Sword and it is effective against cavalry and armored foes. If her speed is 1 more than the foe's speed, then she gains 1 extra special charge per attack. So Sheeta has insane speed but terrible base attack. A hero with that kind of stat spread pretty much has to rely on effective against tags or special activations to 1-round KO enemies. This weapon solves that problem. Winged Sword has the effective against tag, lets her gain special charges faster, and the 16 might and 3 extra speed from upgrading it also helps quite a bit. She's still a pretty squishy hero on the physical bulk side of things, so the standard Fury Desperation cookie cutter build is what I'd recommend if you are looking for something that doesn't cost too much. If you have Defense Ploy Seal, then that'll help her damage quite a bit as well, but it will depend on your Sheeta's IVs. Zephyr's ECKESACHS inflicts defense -6, excluding dragons, within 2 spaces at the start of each turn. If unit is attacked by foe using bow, daggers, magic, or staff, unit receives defense and resistance +6. So it's basically Durant defense 4 and distant defense 3. Not a very flashy weapon, but it's actually really good on Zephyr. He's probably one of the better, if not the best, warrior fighter user because of his stat line. Insanely high HP defense with average resistance and plain out terrible speed. There's really no difference between, let's say, 22 or 24 speed and 16 speed. The lower the irrelevant stats are, the better, because the points are allocated somewhere else. That being said, if you give him the distant defense 3 seal, then he's hitting about 36 resistance. Combine that with his HP and he has a total of 94 magical bulk. His physical bulk is even higher, and with Warrior Fighter equipped, he's going to be one difficult guy to take down, especially if you take into account armor emblem buffs. If you charge up his special and he hits you with that defense debuff, he's going to hit insanely hard. The downside is that he pretty much requires distant counter in the ace slot. Here's an example build for him. Everything is what you would expect on him. The assist is flexible. For the special, you want to keep the cooldown as low as possible since he can't really generate charges quickly due to Warrior Fighter, so Bonfire should be good enough. C slot is where it gets a bit interesting. It depends on the team composition, of course. You can go for Ward Armor, Armor March, Attack Smoke, or even Panic Ploy. If you are running him on a triple ward armor team, it wouldn't be a bad idea to swap out Warrior Fighter for guard, since specials would be the only thing really hurting him at that point. HINOKA'S weapon is HINOKA'S Spear, grants attack and speed +4 during combat if infantry or flying ally is within 2 spaces of the unit. Infantry and flying allies within 2 spaces can move to a space adjacent to unit. This is a great weapon to use with Tsunaki's upgraded Cymbeline, but anyways, it's got built-in Swift Barrel with a requirement and the guidance effect, except it works with flying allies instead of armored. It's another one of those skills that promotes mixed emblem, which is a great thing because having diverse team compositions keep things fresh, as it allows for more flexible and creative team compositions. At least that's what I think. Hinoka was always overshadowed by Cordelia, so this weapon definitely makes her stand out, and maybe players will start to use and build her instead of using her as home flyers fodder. As for builds, I think Swift Sparrow or a bond skill is probably the best option. Just make sure she's receiving some sort of speed buff. Neutral speed Hinoka with Swift Sparrow only reaches 40 speed, which isn't fast enough to double most reds, so yeah. Speed buffs will help a lot. B slot is pretty flexible, but I generally like hit and run on flyers. In the C slot, a tactic skill is what you'll want. Since Hinoka is the one that wants a attack buff more than a defensive buff, it's better to give Hinoka a defensive skill buff and have someone else on the team grant the attack buff, which is why I'm using defense tactic in the example. The seal is flexible but drive defense combos pretty well with defense tactic. If she's on a flyer emblem team, then all you have to do is use home flyers and swap the seal to attack +3, speed +3, or quick impulse and go for flyer formations or hit and run in the B slot. Raven's weapon BASILIKOS accelerates special trigger and has built-in life and death 3. Oof, a very offensive combination of effects. Raven was going to be the glass cannon axe god when Fire Sweep Axe gets released, but I guess I'll take BASILIKOS instead. The weapon effect is pretty straightforward, so there's not that much to talk about honestly. He pretty much needs 2 things: desperation and an offensive stat boosting ace skill. The special and seal slot is where you can start playing around with other skills. Here's what I would go: BASILIKOS, Gale Force, Fury, Desperation, Attack Smoke, and Heavy Blade. Double life and death is way too glass cannon for my liking. I think Fury is better because his offensive stats are already really good. All he needs to do is survive that one hit to get into desperation range, and Fury is the perfect skill for that. BASILIKOS lowers Gale Force's cooldown to 4, and with Heavy Blade's Sacred Seal, he can proc Gale Force every 2 hits. So basically he can pop Gale Force and wipe an entire team just by himself if you wanted to. If you want to go for a cheaper build, then swap Gale Force out for Glimmer or Moonbow and the Seal out for Speed +3, or even Brash's Assault. Desperation could be viable, to be honest. Last build is FELICIA'S Plate, damage calculated using the lower of foe's defense or resistance. That right there is a powerful and great effect for Felicia. If an enemy has, let's say, 40 defense with 15 resistance, then Felicia is just going to chip away at that 15 resistance stat and ignore the defense stat. The effect is obviously situational, but generally I think most units in the game have very lopsided defensive stats. The second part of the effect grants special cooldown charge +1 if foe uses magic. Magic referring to mages only, not Dragonstone by the way. If she attacks or gets attacked by a mage, she'll get an extra special charge and it works on both phases. Felicia was already one of the best anti-mages in the game. This weapon makes her an even better anti-mage and actually makes her a player phase threat. The only problem is that there's so many units in Arena running around with distant counter, and Felicia has terrible physical bulk to the point where she'll get one-shotted, so I wouldn't go too crazy on player phase builds unless you give her one sweep. I would recommend going for a mix or enemy phase set. Maybe something like this. She can tank and kill the strongest Reinhardt on enemy phase. Then on the player phase, she can do some work on melee enemies without distant counter thanks to Fury and Speed Ploy. It's also worth considering plus defense minus resistance IVs for Felicia. Those IVs maximizes her defensive bulk so she can tank distant counter enemies much better. There's a bunch of viable Felicia builds that you can make, so take my example with a grain of salt. It really depends on how you use her and what her role is on the team. All of these weapons are really strong in their own way. I would do a ranking or a priority list on which ones to upgrade first, but there's really no point. I would just say that the top 3 in my opinion are Alms, Ravens, and FELICIA'S. And the question of the video is, which one of these weapons are you upgrading, if any? If you do answer this question, feel free to share your builds as well. For me, I'm going to upgrade Alms, then Ravens. For Alm, I'm planning on building the one sweep build that I showed earlier in the video. And for Raven, I'm going to go with the Gale Force build. That's going to be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.